Thank you, Charlie. This is Victor. We are going for our families.
MS1.
This is Christina. We are going for our teammates.
This is Jeremy. We are going for all humanity.
All right, Charlie, your Artemis II crew is go for launch. Full send.
I copy that. Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy. On this historic mission, you take with you the heart of this Artemis team, the daring spirit of the American people and our partners across the globe, and the hopes and dreams of a new generation. Good luck. Godspeed, Artemis II. Let's go.
We're listening to a conversation that will likely make history in the field of space exploration. It's the 1st of April 2026, and we're in Cape Canaveral, Florida, just moments before the launch of the Artemis II mission. On one line are astronauts Victor Glover, Christina Cook, Jeremy Hansen, and Reed Wiseman. On the other line is Launch Director for NASA's Exploration Ground Systems Program, Charlie Blackwell Thompson.
And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7. RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis II now bound for the moon. Humanity's next great voyage begins.
NASA's rocket, the Space Launch System, lifts off with the roar of its engines, conveying its immense power as flames and smoke billow around it. At the very top of the almost 100-meter rocket is Orion, the spacecraft hosting the 4 astronauts and bringing them on a trip around the moon. Welcome to Euronews Tech Talks, the podcast that explores the digital, technological, and scientific landscape shaping Europe. I'm your host, James Thomas. In today's episode, we look back at the Artemis II mission, the first astronaut mission to the moon since 1972. To better understand what this mission is about and what's next, I sit down with space journalist Kate Arkless-Gray and science journalist Senne Starckx. Together, we try to make sense of what has happened over the past 2 weeks in space and define Europe's role in it all. So we are here with Kate Arkless-Gray, a freelance space journalist based in the UK, and Senne Starckx, a freelance science journalist based in Belgium. So you're both here with us today to share your thoughts and insights on the Artemis II mission. On the night between the 1st and the 2nd of April, were you among the ones who stayed awake to watch the launch of Artemis II live? Kate, let's start with you.
Absolutely. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. In fact, it was only the need for surgery that kept me from being there in person. But I have been watching almost every minute of this mission because it's such a historic thing. It's the first time that anyone has been around the moon in my lifetime. I wasn't here for Apollo. I've read about it. I'm inspired by it. But now it's happening in my life with a whole crew going around the moon. So it's seeing, the first non-American, the first woman, the first person of color. It's just such an inspirational mission. And I think this crew have been absolutely brilliant in bringing us all along on the journey with them. And also their insights into sort of looking back at the planet and how lucky we are to live on this blue marble that we're on.
So it's fair to say you have felt pretty inspired, pretty amazed.
Absolutely. And I was lucky enough to be there for Artemis I when that launched. So I know what it's like to feel the power of that rocket, because you don't just see a rocket launch. It's a whole sensory experience. Everybody around you cheering, you see all the light and so bright when those engines light. But then after a little while, it's the most perfect example of like stuff that you learned at school about light traveling faster than sound, because you see all of this And then just a few moments later, you start with this rumble, and it just gets louder and louder and louder. And then you feel it, you really feel it thumping in your chest. It's an incredible experience to watch a rocket launch.
And Senne, what about you, and how did you feel?
Yeah, I watched too, of course. It was postponed a couple of times, so I wasn't sure either that it would now happen. I watched it from bed, actually, because it was a bit after midnight already. So yeah, I like to watch it. It's the most powerful rocket ever built. I was really looking out because it was still light, so you could see it very well. I was happy that finally it went to the moon, and we could start covering it, following it from after the launch. Yeah?
So can you both tell me, I'll start with one of you, but what it's actually all about?
It's about the moon landing, but it's a test mission. It's comparable to Apollo 8 in the 60s, which was the first manned mission to the moon. That didn't land either, but that was a step up for the famous historic Apollo 11. This is a test mission, and in the Artemis program, they choose to run through all the tests, all the phases again before going for a new moon landing.
And Kate, you mentioned, I think, before Artemis I. So Artemis, I take it from that, is part of a moon program by NASA, which encompasses other missions, so like Artemis 1, 3, 4, etc. So can you tell us more about what happened with Artemis 1 and about any future Artemis missions?
Yeah, absolutely. So Artemis 1 was the check that the rocket would work, that the capsule would survive the trip around the moon and come back down to Earth. Artemis 2 is where they put humans on board for the very first time. So they're testing all the life support systems, the temperature and the air and the water. They're also doing a bit of manual flying of the spacecraft. This is not the Orion capsule that will land on the moon. It's one of the human landing systems being built either by SpaceX or Blue Origin. So Artemis 3 was due to be the human landing on the moon, but that has now been updated. They will send Orion into Earth orbit and rendezvous and dock with either one or both of those human landing systems to check that that's possible. And then Artemis 4, hopefully in 2028, will see human footprints on the moon.
Well, as a more general question, why do we even want to go back to the moon?
It's a very good question, James, but it's not so easy to answer. This Artemis program is about inspiration, prestige. The US and their partners, they want to pick up the thread again from where they left it in the 70s after the Apollo program. And then they say, we go to the moon to explore more further journeys like Mars. They say the moon is like a test body, or to test your journeys for Mars, to test technology, to test how we deal with cosmic radiation, with water, with making rocket fuel outside the Earth. But it's more about inspiration and prestige, I think.
So Senne was talking about the prestige of being back on the moon, and that countries are trying to do this. So there's a political element to us wanting to go back to the moon as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, space exploration isn't all just about human curiosity, especially when it comes to funding missions. I mean, what's lovely about Artemis is that it's a far more international mission than the Apollo missions were. There's all the different countries that are involved with the Artemis Accords. In fact, on Artemis II, it was the European service module that was the one that did the translunar injection burn, taking them around the moon. We've got the Canadian astronaut on board. We're seeing people working together more. Although there's still tension, of course, between the US and China, and I'm not sure that's going to get resolved anytime soon.
And from a more scientific perspective, what do we still want to discover about the moon that we don't already know, Senne?
For geologists, for example, the moon is a way to study Earth because it's in a pristine state since it was formed. And on Earth, the crust has been deformed and changed because of plate tectonics and volcanism. So to study the early Earth, you ironically have to go to the moon. So that's one reason. There are other reasons. For example, the other side of the moon, the dark side or the hidden side, because it's not dark, of course, would be very suitable to put telescopes to look further into the universe. And of course, for manned exploration missions, the moon is interesting because it's easier to launch from them because you have less gravity, you have no atmosphere. So that's also an advantage. But I think we already know a lot about the moon. It's more like, how can we build a permanent presence there? How can we build a moon base? How can we harvest water there? But that's not really fundamental science. It's more like developing technology, ways to live there, to make it suitable for a human presence and activities.
So this is Euronews Tech Talks, so we need to talk about Europe a little bit as well. So can you tell us how the European Space Agency, or the ESA, has also contributed to Artemis II, Senne?
So Kate already explained. So Europe built the ESM, the European Service Module, which propulses the Orion capsule, but also delivers air, water, energy via the solar panels. So that's a large contribution by Europe, by ESA. There's another contribution that was planned in the Artemis program, the Lunar Gateway, this moon station, but that recently was cancelled. So Europe was also building pieces for that, and it's not really clear what will happen with these pieces because the NASA now wants to build a moon base on the surface instead of this moon station circling around the moon. So that's a new plan. So it's a bit chaotic, actually. Yeah? So everybody's watching Artemis II now and how they go around the moon and all these fantastic pictures. But for Europe now, it's a bit of a double situation. They have to figure out how to go further because they did their commitments with NASA, but NASA has changed the program, the Artemis program, and it's not clear what Europe can get back now because in return, NASA doesn't pay ESA. It's more like they give European astronauts the chance also to go to the moon in the Artemis program. But that's not very clear now if that's still going to happen without this moon station. So ESA, they're studying the new proposals of NASA and they are figuring out how to respond to this.
Yeah, I agree with Senne. Everything's kind of in limbo at the moment. Their new plans are quite ambitious. It'll be interesting to see how they manage to build this, especially when NASA itself is facing some rather big budgetary cuts. Just recently, in fact, the presidential budget request came out. And once again, like last year, he really wants to slash a lot of NASA's budget. So a lot of the science budget is being cut, and all of the STEM and outreach education budget is being cut, which it feels a bit short-sighted.
So far, though, what has your favourite moment of the mission been, Kate?
Oh, my goodness. Favourite moment? This crew is so wonderful. I've absolutely loved watching the way that they work together. Obviously, such a great close team. I have to say they completely caught me out when they just broke the record for the furthest distance ever travelled. And Jeremy Hansen, the Canadian astronaut, had some words and then said that the crew would like to name 2 previously unnamed craters, features on the moon. One of them they want to name on the far side after their Integrity capsule. And then the other one they wanted to name in honor of Reid Wiseman's late wife, Carol. And that was such an emotional moment. I've lost my mother. Reid Wiseman has 2 daughters. They've watched him sit on this rocket, blast off into space, go on the far side of the moon. Just as he's about to do that, they asked to be able to name this crater just on the border of the near and the far side of the moon after their mother. What a special, very human, very emotional moment that was.
And let's have a listen to that very emotional moment.
A number of years ago, we started this journey in our close-knit astronaut family, and we lost a loved one. Her name was Carol, the spouse of Reid, the mother of Katie and Ellie. And if you want to find this one, you look at Glushko, and it's just to the northwest of that, at the same latitude as Ohm, and it's a bright spot on the moon. And we would like to call it Carol, and you spell that C-A-R-R-O-L-L.
And how about you, Senne?
Well, the logical answer would be that I would take the flyby around the moon, so the closest passage. But actually, my expectations were very high for that. And they let me down a bit because the live stream, I followed it a couple of days before, it was night. But the images were not very clear. They were low res. There was not much to see. The nice images we now have only came later. My favorite moment until now is when they sent this first picture of a full Earth, very colorful, a couple of days after the launch from the high orbit. That I found a really cool picture. But from the flyby, I found that NASA let me down a bit because I think with all the technology we now have, we should have had like an experience in real time when the public can really watch this fantastic footage. directly without the delay of a day or two.
Oh, come on. That takes a lot of data, and we've got a limited bandwidth to get these images down. I think they've done a pretty good job because they're testing the optical communication system, and that's allowed them to download like gigabytes worth of data.
Well, it's clear that both of you are obviously very passionate about this from the discussion we've had so far. But of course, not everybody shares the same enthusiasm for space that you do. So here are some comments that we collected from the people in the streets of Brussels.
I think it's interesting, but I'm not really into it.
Yesterday I was watching the YouTube live. It's like the new borders of humankind.
It's nice to have this back. It was 50 years ago, last time we went around the moon. I don't think it must be the main focus, but it's definitively one of the best focus we can have, because at some point, if we will run out of Earth, we may need to find another one.
For me, it's not really interesting. I don't think it's going to help anyone on here, so...
It's not something I keep up with, and I think there's probably more important things to be focused on.
I would say it's important, but it's just out of curiosity, probably. Amazing that we get to discover outer space, like we get to bridge some barriers.
I heard that they were on the other side of the moon. Very scary. No signal at all. I think I wouldn't change places.
So we've just listened to many different opinions about the Artemis II mission. Among them, certain people claim there are some more interesting topics to focus on to help people on Earth, an argument that's often brought up when we talk about space. So how would you answer that? How would you answer the claim that there are more interesting things that we could be doing on Earth to help people?
There's nothing stopping us doing both. We really could do both if we wanted to. But what I say to people who are a bit kind of hum-ha about whether we should be spending money on space, there's a few things. Firstly, all the money spent on space is spent here on Earth. So it's creating jobs and a whole industry and helping the economy. There are bits of climate research that we can only do from space. So those Earth observation satellites, for example, are giving us information that we would not be able to get any other way. That will certainly help us work out how best we can combat climate change, and it will give us information about how it's affecting certain areas. And then you've got things like the human research that's being done on the International Space Station and on the Artemis II mission. That could lead to real-world lessons and things that could help us here on Earth, and it has done. With things like bisphosphonates that were, research was done on the International Space Station because the astronauts lose a lot of bone density, and these drugs were developed, but they can be used here on Earth for people with osteoporosis. So there are all sorts of different ways that space impacts our lives here on Earth. Also, just picking up on the person that was saying we need to do space exploration in case we need to put humanity somewhere else. I personally don't buy into that thinking. Personally, I think what we can learn in space is incredibly important, but it's important we then use that knowledge to save this that we're on right now.
And how about you, Senne? How do you respond to some of the things that we've heard?
I think I agree with Kate. You can do both. I think what we spend on civil space programs is really nothing still compared to what we spend on military purposes, I guess. I don't have the right numbers, so I'm careful with that claim, but I think you don't have to choose between certain things. On the other hand, I can also agree that when people say we have a climate crisis, there are more urgent things. And when NASA says, when we look at Earth, look at our vulnerable planet, that's all nice, but we know that already. When are we going to do something about it? So from that side, I'm again a bit more critical maybe. But in the end, I'm quite positive. Like the Artemis program is a civil space program. It's not dual use or something. So I'm really happy that this is like a bit old-fashioned a space program that is putting borders further, that is learning much more about the solar system. It brings us further, and who knows, maybe one day to Mars.
It's certainly a fascinating topic, the whole thing, but unfortunately, that's all we have time for now. So Kate Arkless and Senne Starckx, thanks so much for joining us on Euronews Tech Talks. On the 10th of April 2026, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, Jeremy Hansen and Reed Wiseman came back to Earth. The Orion's crew module separated successfully from the European service module, re-entered and sped through Earth's atmosphere. It then slowed down using parachutes and splashed down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego, California.
We're at 5,000 feet. Good 3 main chutes, good reefing, good descent rate.
Good rates, and we see 3 good-looking parachutes.
Integrity about to complete a journey spanning 694,481 miles from its launch from the Kennedy Space Center back on April 1st, and a trip around the moon.
Integrity, splashdown, sending post-landing command now.
Splashdown confirmed.
Copy Splashdown, waiting on VLDR.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time. From the pages of Jules Verne to a modern-day mission to the moon, a new chapter of the exploration of our celestial neighbor is complete. Integrity's astronauts back on Earth.
That's it for today's episode of Euronews Tech Talks. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and learned something more about the Artemis II program. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and this time we'll stop talking about space to better explore the world of social media. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, James Thomas. This series was created by Marta Rodriguez Martinez. This episode was written and produced by Alice Carnavali. The theme music is by Leo Lebrun. Sound editing and sound mixing is by Johan Breton. Our editor-in-chief is Niaz Samadizada. Thanks to Cecilia Koparanyan and Rebecca Spezzano for recording the Vox Pops. Some of the audio files in this podcast episode came from NASA. They include the audio of the launch, the one about Carol, and the one about the astronauts' arrival back on Earth. If you aren't already, you can listen to this series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider leaving us a positive review and, of course, sharing it. Thanks for listening.